You're driving through Oregon, the Pacific Northwest postcard state. Tall evergreens, clean air, mountain views, rivers cutting through valleys. A place that, not long ago, felt like the next big destination for West Coast money. People were fleeing expensive metros, chasing more space, better quality of life, and a smarter housing deal. And then you start noticing something that doesn't match the scenery. For sale signs that aren't moving, listings that keep getting relisted, price reductions that feel desperate, neighborhood streets where the lights are off, even at dinner time, open houses with no cars parked outside, homes sitting silent, waiting, while sellers slowly bleed, carrying costs. At first, you'd assume it's seasonal, maybe a normal cooling period, maybe buyers are just waiting for spring. But the data doesn't look seasonal, it looks structural. Inventory is surging in pockets of the state, hitting levels that would have been unthinkable during the frenzy years. Buyer demand isn't just soft. In some areas, it has collapsed. The old bidding war culture has been replaced by something worse for sellers: indifference, silence, no urgency, no offers, no competition. And when you combine rising inventory with vanishing buyers, you don't get a stable market. You get gridlock. You get trapped homeowners. You get equity sliding backward. You get price cuts that don't create a rebound. Because the real problem isn't pricing psychology, it's affordability math. You get landlords bleeding on vacancy. You get investors rushing for the exit at the same time. And you get local economies absorbing the shock. Today, we're taking a road trip through 10 Oregon cities where this freeze is showing itself the clearest. These aren't just random places. These are areas where the warning lights are blinking. More supply, fewer qualified buyers, longer days on market, more delinquencies, more distressed listings, and more owners who are realizing the exit door isn't as wide as they thought. And as we move toward the number one spot, you'll see a city that looks like it's drifting toward a slow motion ghost town effect. Empty units, stalled sales, and sellers cutting prices aggressively with no response. This isn't to scare you, it's to inform you so you don't make a financial decision based on yesterday's reality. If you want to stay ahead of the market instead of reacting after the damage is done, like the video, subscribe to the channel and comment if you're seeing the same signs where you live. We're about to drive straight into the eye of the storm. Number 10, Medford. We start in southern Oregon, just north of the California border. On paper, Medford looks like it should be resilient. It's a hub. It attracts retirees. It has regional commerce. It used to benefit from California buyers looking for a cheaper version of the West Coast lifestyle. But as you roll through subdivisions and quiet streets, you can feel the tension under the surface. This isn't a market humming along. It's a market holding its breath. Medford is showing one of the higher foreclosure risks in the state. Recent filings suggest roughly one in every 2,092 housing units has a foreclosure action. That may sound small until you compare it to national baselines and understand what foreclosure really represents. Not a single event, but a pipeline. Missed payments become delinquencies. Delinquencies become legal filings. Filings become forced sales. Forced sales pressure prices. Now add inventory. Here, listings have expanded sharply, nearly 40% year over year. That's not a little more choice. That's a supply wave. And supply waves only stay harmless if demand rises with them. But demand isn't rising here. The affordability gap is widening to the point where the local workforce can't absorb the market. To afford even entry-level ownership comfortably, estimates push toward 80,000 floors income thresholds, but local median incomes sit well below that. That mismatch is deadly because it means the market requires buyers who don't exist locally, buyers who must be imported. And when the imported buyers stop showing up, the entire machine stalls. That's why rental vacancy is creeping towards 7% in some segments. Landlords aren't just competing with each other, they're competing with reality, wages, job stability, and the cost of living. Homes listed for sale are sitting around 55 days on average, nearly 2 full months of carrying costs. For homeowners with large mortgages, that's not a minor inconvenience. It's a monthly burn rate. Price cuts are also becoming routine. Around 35% of active listings have had a reduction recently. More than 1 in 3 sellers admitting the market won't meet their original expectations. And when delinquencies tick up around 2.5% in the county, it signals a deeper issue. Households are running out of financial cushion. Savings don't last forever. And when the cushion is gone, forced decisions appear. Medford isn't the worst, but it's a warning. It's the southern edge of a bigger pattern, because as we head north, the numbers don't improve. Number 9, Eugene. Next stop, Eugene, a university town, a culture hub, a place people assume is protected because students, faculty, and institutional stability should keep housing demand solid. But that assumption is exactly what traps investors. Because yes, a college town has built-in churn, but churn doesn't automatically mean strong demand at any price. It means demand exists if the pricing fits the income reality. And right now, Eugene is showing stress in both the rental and ownership markets. Multifamily vacancy has surged past 6% in certain segments. And that matters because investors bought here expecting simple math. Rent covers mortgage, the rest is profit. When vacancy rises, that math breaks. A few empty months can erase an entire year of returns. And once investors feel pain, they don't wait politely, they list. Single family inventory has also expanded aggressively, about 28% year over year. That's a major supply increase in a market that used to feel tight. Days on market is stretching towards 60 days. 2 years ago, this kind of listing time would have looked almost impossible in many Oregon markets. Today, it's becoming normal. Now look at the price to rent ratio. When that ratio climbs above 25, it's a signal. Buying is much more expensive than renting. That removes first-time buyers from the equation because they aren't chasing ownership pride. They're chasing monthly affordability. If renting is far cheaper, they rent. And the average home price holding around $480,000 stays completely out of sync with local wages. That's why mortgage applications are reportedly down around 19%. Buyers aren't just hesitant. Many are simply unqualified at current rates. The absorption rate is weakening too, hovering near or below 2 months of supply in the wrong direction. In normal language, homes are not being absorbed fast enough to keep the market tight. And when 12% of listings sit 90 plus days with no offers, you're seeing the early stage of a freeze. Sellers waiting, buyers refusing, and time doing the damage. Eugene's charm is real, but charm doesn't solve financing. And in 2025, financing is the market. Number 8, Salem. Now we head toward the state capital. You'd assume government jobs stabilize everything. Steady employment, institutional anchors, predictable paychecks. But Salem is getting squeezed by something stronger than job stability, interest rates, and affordability compression. This city is experiencing a freeze in the move-up market. And when move-up buyers disappear, everything upstream breaks. People can't sell starter homes because move-up buyers aren't buying. They can't sell mid-tier homes because the next tier isn't moving. So inventory stacks up. Listings are up roughly 33% year over year. That's not subtle. It feels like everyone decided to sell at once and nobody told the buyers to show up. Affordability is brutal. Nearly 45% of income required for median home ownership in some estimates, far above the 30% guideline that keeps households stable. When ownership requires almost half your income, one unexpected expense can trigger delinquency. And sure enough, foreclosure starts have been rising, up around 15% in the last quarter in this county. Price reductions are everywhere. Nearly 40% of listings cutting asking prices. That level of cutting means sellers are competing against each other, not against buyers. There's also a broader economic signal: downtown office vacancy. Remote and hybrid work reduces demand for living close to certain employment centers. That shifts housing value away from location convenience and toward price and space. For some Salem segments, that's not good news. Residential vacancy around 5.8% means hundreds of empty units, a quiet but serious indicator of weakening in local demand. Months of supply has ballooned toward 3.5 months, highest in about a decade for this area. New construction permits are also dropping, down about 22%, because builders know what most sellers are learning the hard way. You can't build into a market that can't afford it. Even the capital isn't immune. And now we leave the larger hubs and start seeing what happens in smaller towns when the market stops. Number 7, Oak Ridge. Turn off the major highway and head into the Cascades foothills. Oak Ridge is the kind of mountain town that benefited heavily during the pandemic wave. Remote workers, second home buyers, vacation rentals, people seeking space and isolation. During the boom, that isolation looked like an advantage. Now it looks like a liability. Vacancy is staggering. Nearly 20% of housing units sitting empty. That includes seasonal homes that aren't booking, vacation rentals that aren't generating income, and second homes owners can't justify holding. And when a town lacks a diversified economy, housing becomes fragile. Small towns don't have endless job pools to catch falling demand. Values that climbed about 60% in 3 years are now reversing. Even an 8% decline from peak might not sound catastrophic until you remember leverage. Many buyers purchase near the top with large loans. A small price drop can wipe out down payments quickly, especially when closing costs and higher interest are included. Homes here are taking 70 plus days to sell. That's 2.5 months of mortgage payments, taxes, insurance, maintenance, while the house produces nothing. Add the poverty rate hovering around 26%, and you get a blunt reality. Locals can't buy the inventory. If outside money disappears, the market freezes. Non-owner occupied listings have doubled in the past 12 months in some tracking. Investors trying to dump properties. The problem is, who buys them? You see sale signs fading in the sun, and you realize the trap. When liquidity disappears, value becomes theoretical. You can't cash out of a theory. Oak Ridge shows what happens when a boomtown becomes an exit town. Number 6, rhododendron. Now we climb higher, into forested retreat territory, a place built for weekend escapes, cabins, quiet roads, mountain air, a dream during the travel reset years. But right now it feels still, too still. These markets rely on discretionary spending. When the economy tightens, second home buyers pull back first. They don't downgrade, they pause. And when they pause, sales volume falls off a cliff. Active inventory in this zip has expanded drastically, up around 50% compared to levels 2 years ago. Many owners are listing vacation rentals because bookings dried up. The income they counted on is gone. And without that income, the property turns from asset into monthly bill. Sales volume has dropped around 45%. That means nearly half the normal transaction activity has vanished. And when transactions vanish, pricing becomes fragile because comparables weaken and sellers panic. Days on market has stretched beyond 90 days, 3 months of carrying costs. And those costs are getting worse because insurance is crushing this area. Wildfire risk premiums have surged, tripling for some owners. That adds hundreds per month, turning borderline affordability into impossible ownership for new buyers. It also traps existing owners who can't sell because buyers won't touch the numbers. A quarter of sellers withdrawing listings shows the desperation. They can't get the price they need, so they pull back and hope for a miracle. But miracles aren't a strategy. Year-round vacancy is climbing as short-term rentals sit empty. And when short-term rentals fail, the entire investor story collapses. It's a beautiful drive through the trees, but financially, it's one of the ugliest pictures in the state. Number 5, Silverton, back into the Willamette Valley. Silverton is picturesque, historic homes, charming streets, the kind of town that looks like stability, the kind of town that feels insulated. But markets don't crash based on aesthetics, they crash based on math. And the math here is flashing warnings. Some analytical risk models have flagged this area with an 87% downturn risk in the next 12 months, one of the highest signals in the region. That doesn't mean a crash is guaranteed, but it does mean the pricing is stretched far beyond what local fundamentals justify. Values rose around 55% during the boom, far above wage growth. That's what creates a bubble. Price growth untethered from income growth. Now rates have risen, and the bubble is leaking fast. Around 4% of mortgaged homes in this community are estimated underwater. Owners who owe more than the home is worth. Underwater owners become trapped. They can't sell without bringing cash to the closing table, so they delay. They hope, they hold on, until they can't. The sale to list price ratio sliding to around 97% confirms sellers aren't getting what they ask. The market is negotiating downward, and when unemployment creeps up, around 4.8% in the county, it adds pressure to households already stretched thin. Inventory is up around 30% year over year, yet locals can't afford the typical $600,000 price tag. Remote work demand has cooled. The wave that brought outsiders has receded. So you get the perfect storm. Sellers stuck, buyers absent, and time dragging the market down. Number 4, Springfield crossed the river, and you're in Springfield, the blue-collar backbone of the area. Many people assume working-class towns stay resilient because prices are lower. But affordability is relative, not absolute. Even lower-priced towns break when wages can't keep up. Springfield has become a pressure point for the affordability crisis. Median home prices have doubled over 7 years, while wages remained largely stagnant. That's a structural break. Over 50% of renters are spending more than 30% of income on housing, meaning rent is already consuming budget space. When rent consumes budgets, renters can't save for down payments. That kills first-time buyers. And first-time buyers are the foundation of the entire housing chain. Investors are also trying to exit. Inventory is up around 42% year over year, mass landlord offloading. But buyers aren't qualifying. Rates are high, credit is tighter, and the affordability math doesn't work. Days on market around 48 days is high for a market that's supposed to be entry level. Shadow inventory is rising too, with delinquencies approaching 3% in some tracking, owners missing payments but not yet foreclosed. That's the pipeline building behind the scenes. Prices are dipping around 5% recently, but not enough to revive demand. Because again, when financing is tight, small price cuts don't create a buying wave, they just slow the bleeding. This is what a gridlocked market looks like: sellers desperate, buyers locked out, and the working class priced out of their own city. Number 3, Sutton, now deeper into agricultural and manufacturing territory. Smaller towns depend on fewer industries. When those industries stagnate, housing becomes vulnerable fast. This area carries one of the highest risk scores, around 89% downturn risk. Loan to value ratios are high, meaning homeowners have thin equity. Thin equity means weak protection against declines. Home values have dropped nearly 7% in the last 6 months, rapid enough to erase years of savings in half a year. Foreclosure risk is about double the state average, with roughly 1 in every 500 homes in foreclosure proceedings. That kind of distress is not random. It's the result of affordability math colliding with economic stagnation. Down payments are now so high that they can exceed an entire year of minimum wage income. That kills first-time buyers. And without first-time buyers, the market freezes from the bottom. Inventory is up around 35% year over year because sellers can't exit. Rental vacancy near 5.5% means landlords are losing cash flow too. This is the kind of place where capital can get trapped because once liquidity disappears, selling becomes a waiting game. Drop a comment if you think small towns like this rebound or if they continue shrinking, because Oregon is showing something bigger. Not all towns recover the same way after a boom. Number 2, West Fur. This is where the situation turns eerie. West Fur feels like it's fading into the forest. Beautiful, quiet, isolated. But isolation only works as an advantage when people want isolation. When buyers retreat, isolation becomes a problem. Crash risk scores here push toward 93%, reflecting the lack of liquidity. There are months with literally zero home sales. That's not slow. That's frozen. The vacancy rate is nearly 22%, more than 1 in 5 homes empty. And these aren't all wrecks. Many are livable homes that simply can't find a buyer at any price that makes sense. Days on market can stretch beyond 100 days, pushing sellers to delist in frustration. Taxes feel heavy relative to local services. Retirees, who might consider quiet life in the woods, are also hit by the reality of healthcare access, services, and maintenance costs. Yet median list prices still float above $400,000 in some cases, totally disconnected from demand. Sellers cut 10% or more, and still nothing moves. Behind the scenes, delinquencies are estimated above 3%. Again, pipeline. Westfire is the warning label for what happens when a town runs out of people, runs out of buyers, and runs out of liquidity. Number 1, Woodburn finally. We merge back toward the main interstate and arrive at the number 1 spot, a commuter town, a place you'd assume is protected because it sits on a major corridor. Easy access, lots of traffic, close enough to bigger economic engines. But in this cycle, commuter math is breaking. High interest rates and fluctuating gas prices have destroyed the affordable commute hack. What used to feel like a smart compromise now feels like a burden. And this is why Woodburn is flashing the most concentrated negative indicators in the state. Risk models put downturn probability around 95%, about as close to statistical certainty as these tools can get. Inventory is up roughly 55% year over year. Supply is flooding the market faster than buyers can absorb it. And when supply floods, while demand weakens, prices don't hold, they bend. Rental vacancy is pushing toward 8%, forcing landlords to offer extreme incentives, months of free rent, just to fill units. That's not normal. That's distress. Nearly 60% of homes are selling below their original list price. That means most sellers are taking a haircut just to escape. Foreclosure rates are the highest on our trip. Roughly 1 in every 100 homes facing repossession. Unemployment in this zip code is higher than the national average, further shrinking the pool of qualified buyers. So you get the perfect storm. Too much supply, too few buyers, weak local economic stability, landlords bleeding, commuter economics collapsing, and the result is a town that should be thriving but feels like it's freezing. What this road trip really shows you. As we finish this drive through Oregon, one reality becomes unavoidable. This isn't just a few isolated pockets. It's a pattern spreading across the state. Inventory rising, demand falling, affordability breaking, and homes sitting empty long enough to change seller psychology. And here's why that matters. Real estate is not just prices, it's liquidity. When liquidity disappears, everything changes. Sellers become trapped, investors rush for exits, price cuts accelerate, distressed inventory grows. Local economies feel the pressure. This correction doesn't need a dramatic crash headline to be real. A slow freeze can do damage just as effectively because it drains people quietly, month by month. If you're a buyer, the key is patience and leverage. Don't chase. Don't overpay for last cycle pricing. Watch days on market. Watch inventory. Watch price cuts. Watch delinquencies. If you're a seller, the key is realism. The market doesn't reward denial. It rewards correct pricing and clean terms. If you're priced like it's 2021, you'll sit like it's 2025. If you're an investor, the key is cash flow, truth, not fantasy. If the numbers don't work with conservative assumptions, they don't work. If you found this breakdown useful, like the video and share it with anyone tracking housing right now. Subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive into the U.S. housing economy. And comment below, what state should we drive through next?